So question 24, a random sample of 800 students statewide finds that 64% are proficient in reading. First of all, we want to find the standard deviation, and this probably actually gives you the formula for the standard deviation, which is nice. Remember, you got to know what p hat is. P hat is your 64%, so you're going to be using 0.64. So p hat is 0.64. Your standard deviation is going to be the square root of p hat times 1 minus p hat, which is going to be 0.36 all over n. N is the number of people in the sample. This is over 800. Okay, so let's work this out. 0.64 times 0.36 divide by 800, and then I'm going to take it to the 1/2 power, which is the square root. Okay, and I'm getting 0.01697. Okay. Anyway, most of these problems I've been having you round either 1 or 2 decimal places. Let's say we're going to round to 1 decimal place, so that's going to be about 1.7% standard deviation. All right, so that's part A. Part 2, use the 68, 95, 99.7 rule to estimate the margin of error for a 95% confidence interval. So remember, for confidence intervals, for a 68% confidence interval, your margin of error is 1 times the standard deviation. For 95%, your margin of error is 2 times the standard deviation. And for 99%, technically 99.7, but it's a rule of thumb, so we're close. The margin of error is about 3 times the standard deviation, all right? So in this one here, we want a margin of error for 95% confidence, so we're going to take 2 times our standard deviation of 1.7, and that's going to be about 3.4%. So they just asked for the margin of error. Technically, I guess it's plus or minus 3.4%. And then they want the upper and lower bounds for that confidence interval. So the mean was 64%, so we're adding and subtracting that 3.4%. So 64 minus 3.4%, that would go down as low as 60.6%. And if we add the 3.4%, we'll get 67.4%. So you have 95% confidence of a value that shows up in that range. All right, and then part D here says determine a margin of error for a 90% confidence interval, then state the confidence interval. So the big thing here is we need to find the number of standard deviations that we want to go out. And we need to do it for 90%, which is not one of our 68, 95, 99 rule values. So we need a z value for a 90% confidence interval, okay? I don't give you a bunch of formulas for this. I want you to be able to use the pictures and think about it. 90% confidence, so that's 90% in the middle. You have 10% on either side, which would leave you with a curve that looks like this. Remember, your table gives you everything to the left. So for this 90% that cuts off in the middle, you actually need 95% is what you're going to go look up in your table. Okay, so if you go over here and you start looking at your table for value close to 95%, you're going to get a value here either at 1.64 standard deviations or 1.65. I'm going to use 1.65 standard deviations. They actually call this z star. It's the z value you're going to use for the confidence interval that you're using. So we're going to go 1.65 standard deviations up and back for our margin of error, okay? So to find the margin of error, we're going to go out 1.65 standard deviations. Remember, our standard deviation here was about 3.4. So the margin of error, I take 1.65 and I multiply by 3.4, we're going to get about 5.61. And so we're going to add and subtract that to our original mean of 64%. So we'll say 64 plus or minus, I guess I'll just use 5.6. Okay, so 64 minus 5.6 is going to take us to about 58.4. 64 plus 5.6 is going to be 69.6. Okay, so it's a little wider. We have a little less confidence, which is going to give us Oh, I'm sorry, I used the wrong value here, actually. I'm sorry, my original standard deviation here was supposed to be 1.7. Sorry, I used my old margin of error. Sorry, that should be 1.7. So my margin of error is going to be 1.65 times 1.7, which is about 0.28, or 2.8%. Okay, sorry, this is all wrong. 64 plus or minus 2.8%. I have a little bit less confidence, so I should have a little bit tighter interval here. So 64 minus 2.8% is going to be about 61.2. If we add that 2.8%, that's going to be about a 68.8%. Okay, so that's the interval that we're looking at. A little bit tighter, but our confidence is a little bit lower.